Hello and welcome to our winter webinar series, and we will be having Armando Boleno talk about empowering your well-being and coping with stress. Just a quick introduction for Armando. Armando Boleno is a 22-year-old graduate from Montclair State University who studied psychology. Armando has studied a lot of psychology and has knowledge from adolescent psychology to abnormal psychology. Armando is a music lover whose interests range from rap to K-pop. He has traveled to the countries of Nicaragua and Colombia, where his parents are from, and has seen the despair of no mental health needs met. He hopes that eventually he'll be able to tighten the gap between those who don't have the means for mental health help. Armando has struggled with his own anxiety and depression and has found ways that work for him to cope healthily that range from journaling to mindful meditation. Without further ado, hand it over to Armando.
Hello, everybody. Just wanted to say hello and thank you for coming into our last installment of our winter webinar series. I am going to close it out with empower your well-being. One thing I want to mention is how coping and resiliency both go hand in hand, because without coping, resiliency wouldn't be able to happen and vice versa. So they both go in a circle, kind of like a yin and yang, if you will. For this presentation, I'm going to be taking a deeper dive into coping, and it's going to range from historical theories of coping, and then it's going to go into more of a self-care approach. Now, the reason we are doing this webinar is more so to kind of close out the year with a peaceful view, an empowering view, and it's more so to show you guys that we are all able to take the power of our well-being and our mental health into our own hands. So without further ado, let's begin. We are going to be covering how to differentiate between positive and negative coping styles. We are going to see the benefits of coping in moderation. We're going to see how different cultures cope, self-care accessibility, and types of self-care. Now, it's very important that when we speak about all of these different five, they all kind of go in together because they have one common goal at the end, and it's to better yourself and empower yourself. Now, while I was researching and looking up, coping and the history, I came across two very interesting historical theories of coping. The first one is called the transactional model of stress and coping. Now, bear with me for a second. I'm just going to read off of the slides, and then we are going to go into just a little bit of each and move on. Now, the transactional model of stress and coping was coined by Richard Lazarus and Susan Folkman. It states that conceptualization, namely that coping is a transaction between the person and the environment. And appraisal is a feature of this coping process. Now, what I can guarantee you this means is that the transactional model concluded that a person's capacity to cope and adjust to challenges is a consequence of our interactions with the environment. So what I mean for that is more so if we are able to cope as in with our world, our everyday life, and ourselves. Now, the way coping could come through that is if we are able to handle it as one. The conservation of resource theory is the theory that states that individuals strive to obtain, retain, and protect that which they value. Stress occurs when resources are threatened, lost, when an individual invests resources without getting adequate return for effort. Though what the conservation of resource theory therefore states is that stress is induced when our resources are threatened and lessened. When we don't have a certain resource that will help us in the long run, more stress will be induced. Money is a good example of a resource. People believe it's kind of needed as a necessity. We needed to pay for things to get things in return. The less money we make, the more stress we are under. It's proven. The more we see of money, the less stress we do have. I mean, there are those people that say more money, more problems, but money does add on to stress because that is a common feature that is needed. Let's go into what we really should be copying, the negative coping styles that we have here. These are negative coping styles that are suggested to be negative. Some coping styles might work for some people and some might not work for others. And before I also go on, I want to mention that in the next 3 slides, please observe the common underlying factor that they all share, the common effect, if you will. The first negative coping style is technology. Technology is seen as a positive coping style sometimes because it's given us so much advancement and we're able to connect a lot faster. But in the end, technology does induce stress signs. A term that I really found interesting was techno stress. This means having too much technology in your life. So it could be either from having a laptop on, having your phone on, having a tablet. And then we also have another term called techno overload. And then this is the feeling of being overwhelmed by the feeling of technology we have in our lives. So you could have all these things and then the stimuli that is presented can really hurt your head. Some warning signs of techno stress can include stress, irritability, difficulty sleeping, and lack of motivation. Now, one thing I want to stress is that we are social beings, humans. We tend to need other interaction, some social interaction. And how are we expected to survive and be contributed members of society when we are not able to connect? There are those moments where it is nice to have those moments by ourselves, but when you don't have that stimuli, then it becomes very stressful and stress-inducing. Isolation can lead to suicidal thoughts, less restful sleep, and stress. The next one we have is risky behavior. Risky behavior could range from substance abuse to reckless driving, and this is anything that puts you in more of a harm's way. People tend to effects of risky behavior include injury, disease, death, more stress, and social problems. Social problems can include a variety of ways. The reason why I chose all 3 of these is because they all kind of share the same distinctions. So from the beginning, we can see that with self-isolation, risky behavior, and technology. When you tend to self-isolate, you turn to technology because that's a good way to kind of put up a wall, a barrier, if you will, between you and the people around you. Now that I have mentioned the 3 negative coping styles like technology, self-isolation, and risky behavior, I'm going to turn over to the audience that we have. I want to know the 3 negative coping styles we have here. What commonality, what effect, if you will, do they all share in common? That they all induce stress. And stress is a key factor in everything that we are going to see here because that is what we're measuring. Now that we have seen negative coping styles, we are going to go into our more positive coping mechanisms. Now, these are things that help reduce stress. A nutritious diet improves your mental well-being and lowers the risk of anxiety and depression. This next bullet point, to stress it, I want to give a little anecdote. There's this movie called Legally Blonde. In this movie, Elle Woods, the main character, she's a law student at Harvard and she's defending this big time exercise queen that used to be a part of her sorority in college. The argument for this woman not committing the murder is she's an exercise queen, and when you exercise, it produces endorphins, and happy people just don't kill. All of these endorphins that get released into your body, they tend to reduce the stress and they make you feel more happy. After a long day, you kind of just want to go home and curl up in your bed. But sometimes exercising could be as simple as going for a brisk walk. Getting in touch with nature really helps improving your focus. It really helps lowering your stress that you have in your life. It increases your mood and it reduces the risk of developing a mental health condition. Now, getting in touch with nature, it doesn't per se have to include you guys going out to the woods or to a mountain and going hiking or running. It could be as simple as just going across the street and going around the corner, going to the supermarket right there. Those are some other ways that you can do it. And also, if you have to travel to somewhere that's close, say like 5 minutes per car, it's better to walk. One, it saves you money with gas, and also it's a good way to, get in touch with what's around you. The next thing I have is hobbies. Now, hobbies are a perfect way to distract yourself after a busy day. It provides you with the opportunity to have me time, and it releases stress that you had throughout the day. So Spending time on an activity that you enjoy can improve your mental health and well-being. So, for example, if you love to listen to music, sometimes listening to stimulating music, it can really relax you and it can get you further throughout your day. So, I know for me, I tend to, honestly, believe it or not, I really like to take a nice drive and it helps me distress, I like to listen to the music that way. It's more so like a change of scenery instead of looking at the same four walls that are around you. It's more so to kind of stimulate your brain while you listen to the music. But how much is too much? Where do we draw the line? Here in front of me, I have a real handy dandy Venn diagram. These two is kind of a win or lose situation, and then we have our middle. So excessive sleep is when you have too much sleep, and sometimes it can be characterized as a hypersomnia, but that's more medical. But what if it's not medically induced? What if it's more so kind of induced by your trauma or by the stresses in your life? It could result you in depression. Versus little sleep, this can lead to having sleep deprivation, making you drowsy at work, moving your attention away. You won't be able to focus at work. And I know these are things that either some of us struggle with and some of us don't. The reason I like the Venn diagram is because in the middle here, we have kind of the shared ways that it has. So I put that a good way to have this equal balance is more so to create a bedtime routine. I know my colleague Natalie, she when she brushes her teeth and it's the night, she can't eat something. This is a way she gets herself in the habit of going to sleep. Now, social media, it could be positive, it could be negative, like I've said. At times, there's times where we indulge in either too much social media, or sometimes if people don't want social media, they don't indulge in it at all, and that's also fine. Now, what I have put here is media in moderation, and this is a smart way to access social media. And a couple ways to do so is by having the right timing, by connecting more carefully, and eliminating mindless scrolling through your day. Another thing that I believe in is also really connecting carefully with who you interact with on the internet. You have to be careful with who you share your information with. I guarantee you we all have done this at some point. We all go either on Instagram, TikTok, and more popular TikTok for me. We tend to just keep going on our phones and really tune out the rest of the world. Some people say this is a good way to eliminate stress, but this has all been found to induce more stress. And it also shortens your attention span as well. Another way that people have combat mindless scrolling is through an app called ClearSpace. It's an app where you can install it through the App Store, and every time you open an app, a clear sort of screen pops up for like a couple, like I would say like 30, maybe a minute or so, I'm not quite sure. But it allows you a time to reflect on why you opened the app and what you're gonna do on the app. It gives you that moment, which I find really helpful for some people, especially if you're not able to sort of put your phone down, because sometimes people use it way too much. Before we get into our next point, this kind of goes in hand with our next point. I have eating and the importance of your gut. Stomach problems are one of the most common symptoms of stress and anxiety. Researchers have identified a connection between the gut and the brain. Like the brain, your gut is full of nerves called the enteric nervous system, or the ENS, also referred to as the second brain. It is estimated that 90% of the body's serotonin is made in the digestive tract. In fact, altered levels of this peripheral serotonin have been linked to disease such as irritable bowel syndrome, cardiovascular disease, and osteoporosis. I put this in here honestly because when I didn't know, and I wanted to shed light on it, because at the same point, it makes a lot of sense when you think about it, why sometimes when we see certain foods, we get excited, we get happy, because our brain is sending that response, not our brain, my bad, our stomach is sending that response to our brain saying, we're about to eat some really good food, we're about to eat some food. And I felt that it was very important to include this, because how do we make sure we maintain a healthy relationship between our gut and our? How do we ensure that we are intaking the right amount of information, what we drink, whatever we intake is important and allows our brain to grow more. And in turn, this all can reduce stress. When we talk about diet, I just want to reassure everyone that there's only two different options. This is ways to kind of better it. It's not in any way, shape, or form to tell you to change what you're eating or change how you're eating, because in turn, what we're just doing here, we're just trying to share what we think can help each other. Overeating, it's eating to the past point of fullness, and ways to combat this is to manage your stress levels. Identify your stressors. If you feel like watching something over and over that reduces your stress levels, then that's a good way. That's something good. If you feel like if you're looking at something and it's inducing your stress, like for example, if this conversation is inducing your stress, please feel free to take a step back. We should all get regular exercise. And when you eat mindfully, just remember what you're putting into your body, of course. Now, when it comes to undereating, this refers to not eating enough to support your body weight. And ways to combat undereating is eat meals that are high in protein, eating complex carbs. Pasta is a really good complex carb. Eating meals frequently throughout the day. So getting your 3 meals a day, your breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And I want to play this quick 4-minute video about the importance of diet and how it also encompasses the gut-brain connection, which I thought was really fun to see.
You probably know the saying, you are what you eat. But what about you think what you eat? We're going to explain. The gut isn't just helpful in keeping us physically healthy. It also plays a really key role in managing mental well-being. So I want to bring in Dr. Uma Naidu to discuss the surprising connection between the brain and the gut. She's a nutritional psychiatrist and the author of the book, This Is Your Brain on Food. This is so fascinating because this whole idea of sort of the brain in your gut and the biome in your gut, it used to be kind of like alternative medicine, alternative thinking, but increasingly more and more is become a mainstream medical conversation. So can we talk about the connection between your gut and your brain?
Thanks so much, Anne-Marie. It's great to talk to you today. The gut and brain is really new, burgeoning scientific work that's come out over the last couple of decades, although Hippocrates eons ago spoke about it. But what we understand is that the gut and brain arise from the exact same cells in the human embryo. So they are connected even from early development. And then they are connected by the vagus nerve throughout our lives. And I like to think of the vagus nerve, which is our 10th cranial nerve, as a text messaging system between the brain and the gut, sending messages all the time that is communicating chemical messages. And one of the things that affects these chemical messages is the food that we eat. So the gut microbes interact with the food that we eat. And on days that we're eating, those healthier foods, they are nurturing and taking care of the good microbes in the gut. But on days that we're kind of heading to the standard American diet, processed, ultra-processed, and fast foods, the bad microbes are taken care of. And that upsets the balance in the gut, leading to conditions like inflammation or dysbiosis. So it's a very important connection that actually explains the food-mood connection.
And we're talking about, people think, oh yeah, my gut always talks to me. It tells me that I'm hungry. We're talking about not just messaging like that, like you're full or you're not full, which is a whole other conversation, but other things about our mental well-being. So then how do we make sure that our gut is healthy so that our mind is healthy? What should we be eating?
That's a great question because honestly, Anne-Marie, nutritional psychiatry is about filling that gap of helping people understand this food-mood connection. And many people talk about food in terms of their waistline or, family history of hypertension, but they don't think about their brain and their mind. One of the best things you can do is clean up your diet a little bit. Start off with fiber. Extremely important for the gut microbes because that's what helps them thrive. And guess what? You can get fiber from elements of the Mediterranean diet or just a good, healthy diet with lots of plant-rich foods, vegetables, beans, nuts, seeds, legumes, healthy whole grains. You can't actually get fiber from animal sources of protein, so lean into those veggies. But then you also want clean proteins in your diet, and you want healthy fats from things like omega-3 fats. And if plant-based, you can get a short-chain omega-3s from chia seeds and flax seeds and things like that. So it's really trying to clean up our diet from that standard American diet called SAD for a reason. And, cutting back on processed foods and leaning into healthy whole foods. I like to tell people, think about eating the whole orange, skip the store-bought orange juice, which has a ton of added sugars.
Really quickly, supplements, yes or no? Because there's a whole category now dedicated to this.
Right. The role for supplements in brain health, especially for the nutritional gaps that we can't fill. B vitamins, if you are short on B vitamins or depending on your diet, B complex vitamins, great for your brain health. Saffron, a great supplement for mood. And speak to your doctor, of course, about the supplement. But there are definitely different ones that can fill in nutritional gaps. So there is a place for supplements, but it's something that is a careful consideration, but always food first. Because, the power's at the end of our fork. We can make a decision at every meal to improve our brain health.
A lot cheaper than a supplement. Dr. Naidu, thank you very much.
It's important that when we talk about self-care is to understand, is our wellness acceptable? Now, I know you guys are probably asking, what does that mean? Like, what is this guy talking about? Is wellness acceptable? Now, what I mean for that is more so is, do I live in an area where I have those green spaces where I'm able to go? Do I have those food markets that I can get those fresh vegetables like Dr. Uma was talking about? Do I have the means to spend more time on myself? And a lot of the times in urban areas, especially, we don't get those. One point that I put for barriers to self-care is the lack of outdoor spaces in urban areas, especially in cityscapes. We tend to not see these parks. I mean, we see like a large area of park and then certain areas of the city that don't have it, and they have to travel all the way over here to the park. Food deserts and food swamps. Now, food deserts refers to not having a sustainable grocery store or a sustainable market near where you live. And the food swamps is definitely more referring to having too much of fast food. Now, sometimes a food desert could be all the way down, like 5 miles down the road, and that takes time away from your personal self-care for what you could be doing. For me, when you can be resting, you have to drive all the way over there and, get in a line and then pay and then come back, and that can cost less time for you to focus on yourself. In a lot of low-income neighborhoods and communities, we tend to see a concentration of liquor stores. There can be a liquor store on the corner of a certain street when that could have been a supermarket, a small neighborhood corner store. It could have been a place where, there could have been lack of a food desert. Instead, there's a liquor store there. So it's stuff like that that combats it, that lowers the effect and lowers how much we're able to go and get what we need, our necessities. Healthcare costs are necessary for doctor's appointments. Healthcare, insurance, we need to focus on, is it accessible for these people who have this money for healthcare? People are going to need to go to doctor's appointments. Do they have the means necessary to go and get what they need? Now, this last point is a really good, interesting way of looking at things. Working class who do not have work from home options spend more time commuting to get to work and less time for themselves and their families. And this reigns true. You could work an hour away and not get home until 6 o'clock if you're getting out at 5. And then there's also traffic, and then there's also all these things, and that's less time that you can be sitting at home, cooking your meal, and that's less time out of your day. Because let's be honest, sometimes when we get home at 6 or 6:30, it's time to cook, and then it's time to eat, and then it's 8:30, and it's time to go to sleep. And that is not very viable for some people. And work from home has been a good option. Our next point is going to be how cultures affect our mental health. Now, here we have two different types. It's individualistic and collectivistic. Now, these two societies that do cope differently have a coexisting way that they both cope. Now, they are less likely to share personal problems with others. This is all individualistic, what I'm reading. They're more likely to seek counseling, and mental health is seen as something shameful and need treatment to heal. Now, I feel like since we all live in the US, it's no secret that we live in more of an individualistic society, and we don't tend to focus on our person next to us. We focus on ourselves more, and that's not a negative thing. It's a positive, but it's also very important to not cast others aside just because they don't have your best interests at heart. I found that people are more likely to seek counseling, and they don't share with the people around them, because currently we're living in, I feel like, a day and age where it's getting more common to share your mental health crises with others. Versus in collective cultures, they rely on your family, on your close friends for advice, and seeking treatment from an institution or a therapist is seen as shameful. It's better to go towards, your family and the people that you have around you for that. Those are the different ways people cope. Which one do you feel like is more important? Do you think the individualistic culture is more important to cope with, or the collectivistic is more important to cope with?
Collectivistic, because it kind of veers away from the self-isolation that we were talking about in the beginning.
We need that mixture, that equal balance. I'm all about balance. All right, thank you guys for sharing. Our next part is going to be on the spirituality as a coping mechanism. Now, before I get into this, I don't want to make it seem like, oh yeah, spirituality is coping. No, it's not, because spirituality is definitely a way of people's life. They definitely include that as a big portion of their life. Now, a way that people include this is prayer. Prayer is a good way to cope with, the stressors that we all have with our lives. I, for one, when I tend to kind of get a little, it gets a little much, I tend to do the sign of the cross. It's a good way to kind of center myself and bring myself inward and look upward to God. Now, prayer is also seen as a very big reduction in blood pressure. There was a study done among African Americans and not European Americans, which I thought was very interesting, where they found that prayer helped reduce their stressors more so than the European Americans, which I thought was very interesting. Now, it doesn't have to be, Catholicism or Christianity. It could be turned to more, it could be turned to Native Americans as well, because they use sweat lodges or temazcals used to purify the soul and connect with their creator, their spirit, their ancestors. Spirituality is a very good way to kind of get in touch with yourself, because once you're able to lower and connect with everything and focus outward, you tend to put everything in motion of what you really want. Types of self-care. Now here we have physical, we have emotional, social, spiritual, and we have how does self-care at work, financial, your personal life, and your space. COVID has really changed a lot of people's mental health and the way we see our mental being, especially, our youth nowadays.
We do things that take care of ourselves every day, like brushing our teeth and washing our hands. These activities are often called self-care. Self-care is something that anyone can do and that everyone should do. Self-care is not selfish, and it is one way we can care for our mental health. Taking care of your emotional well-being is just as important as taking care of your body, because they work together to keep you healthy. Self-care is something you do daily or weekly that focuses on the whole you. This looks different for everyone, so try some things out and see what's best for you.
My granny always told me, baby, when you're feeling like you're in a funk, try to do something you don't normally do. So I take her advice and try to get out of my routine, So if I've been slammed with stuff and just been really busy, I like to get out of the house, get some air, and just listen to my favorite music. Sometimes I'll hop online and play some games with my friends. We'll complain about school, talk about people that we're cool with, people that irritate us, whatever's on our mind. Lately, we've definitely been talking about the pandemic and how life has been going. I tell them that what we do, talking to each other, is self-care. And they laugh about it. They give me a hard time, but I think they're warming up to it. It's taking a break from everything that stresses you out. You do things you like. You maybe write down your feelings, or you talk to your favorite person, or you could even just take a nap, eat, do whatever makes you feel comfortable before you have to jump back into the stress of everyday life. It feels good to do something that makes me feel good,
It can be as simple as taking a deep breath or learning a breathing exercise that helps you calm down when you're stressed. Self-care can also be practicing gratitude, like keeping a journal of things you are grateful for or happy about. Even just saying something nice to a stranger. You can get in touch with your artistic side, or do something like joining a new community or activity. Or, if you're doing too many things, self-care can be saying no to something that you don't want to or cannot do. Because our well-being is connected, self-care for your mental health can also be something physical, like walking outside for 15 to 30 minutes a day, or sticking to a regular sleep schedule. If you have trouble falling asleep at night, try listening to calming noises or staying away from electronics before bed. Sleep is essential to self-care, and getting outside or exercising can help you sleep better at night. If you've been feeling sad, angry, anxious, overly tired, lonely, anything, there are things you can do to help yourself feel better. If you're facing any difficulties with your mental health and your sense of well-being, it's important to take care of yourself. You can always reach out for support, whether that's from a friend or a professional. Connecting with others is a big part of self-care. Remember to do what makes you happier and find things that make you feel better. And make sure that what makes you happy is still healthy behaviors. Don't be afraid to enjoy yourself. The COVID-19 pandemic has made it clear that practicing self-care has an important and positive impact as we get used to a new normal. While self-care is important and helpful, it can't always solve all of your problems, so sometimes you might have to reach out for other support. There are many resources available to you. The first step to self-care is to find what works best for you.
What really does work for us, and I feel like, we have a whole bunch of these self-care here listed, but which one does work for, the individual? Which of these do you feel like you subscribe to when it comes to your personal self-care?
Definitely the personal and the emotional. I go in and out of different things, but definitely trying to keep up with different hobbies. Like I crochet, so I try to do that because that's something that I've learned lowers my stress level and puts me in just kind of a neutral chill mood. And also listening to music, I found over the past couple years has been very, very helpful for my mental health. So learning how to shift my mood through music to either allow me to feel more or to put me in a more positive mood, I think is a very helpful thing for me in terms of self-care.
Looking back on your childhood, we talked a lot about reflection. What is something you did as a child to cope?
Something that I did a lot as a kid, and maybe that was forced into my schedule, was a lot of the sports and the athletics that I did. It really helped me cope and be able to maintain some sort of rigid routine and schedule with my getting outside and doing all these things. And I think it really benefited me at the time, and it's something that I definitely would like to get back into.
What is the youth doing today to really cope? Social media, yes, that is once again, that it's a double-edged sword. It could either be good, it could either be negative. You can meet new people through it, and things are just sometimes they're not the best to do. I know one thing I've seen them doing very negatively is vaping, a lot of vaping, a lot of nicotine use, and so they do know it has nicotine in it, but it's just kind of a coping tool for stress, and it's just you're just inducing more stress to you. Good positive one that the youth does cope is they're a lot more self-aware about what's going on. They understand what's going on in the world. It's usually the little things that we do that really help us in the long run. I feel nowadays we tend to focus on but the bigger things that need to happen, but sometimes those little things they equate to one bigger thing. And I feel us as people, we need to tell people more of that. We tend to focus on the end points and not how to get there and the things that make up getting there. That is the end of my presentation. I have nothing else for you. But before we go, I just want to say thank you for everyone who watched it. I want to thank you guys once again for coming to our winter webinar series. And thank you.
You can go to NJ4S.nj.gov. That's NJ, the number 4S.nj.gov to learn more about the services we offer. And so, just thank you so much, Armando, for this presentation. Greatly appreciate it.